In this video, we're going to look at a process that you can create that will allow your customers to view invoices within a Microsoft Dynamics portal or a Power App portal. So let's go ahead and let's have a look at what this will actually look like for a customer if they're viewing it in the portal. So I'm logged in and I've got a list of invoices. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on an invoice, and here I can see a little bit of data. We're just showing the invoice ID and if there's a date, and here we can see our invoice that is actually embedded within the portal displaying the PDF. So from here I can go ahead and I could download it or I could print it. So let's have a look and just take a look at the invoice itself within Dynamics. So I'm going to go in, here's the invoice. What we've got is a couple of fields. This first one is basically saying, do we want to display this on the portal? Yes or no. Then what we've got is a couple of fields that will allow us to create a path to where the PDF is stored in the portal, which we can then use, and that then gets embedded directly within that PDF window that we saw. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through the entire process so that you can see how you would create this and then end up with a lovely invoice displayed in a portal. Okay, so first of all, if we go back to the invoice, we'll go to an area that hopefully you're familiar with, and that is our Word templates area. So we can see here we've got an invoice Word template. If I go ahead and click this, this generates that Word document template that then downloads, and we could go ahead and we could open it, we could save it as a PDF, we can email it to our customer, whatever we need to do with it. That's fine, but that's manual, it's not so good, and we also need a process to get it onto the portal. So the first thing you would need to do is customize your invoice to display it however you needed it, logo, imagery, whatever you wanted on there. Alright, so that's the first thing. Now, what we've got is a process that will have the links below in the video description. But there's a process that a fellow MVP, fairly new MVP, Bruce Sitole, who was in Australia, he basically blogged about how you can use the Word document templates and you can generate them and create them as PDFs using Power Automate, formerly Flow. So what we've got first of all is this field right here. When changed to yes, or basically when updated to yes or no, what we've got is we've got a Microsoft workflow that is being triggered and started on the change of this specific field. So if I go into my solution, if I go into this process here, so now we've got this process that will run based on the change of that field. So basically if display on portal equals yes, then what we're going to do is we're going to use the action to set the Word template, and what we're going to do is that Word document template for the invoice, we're going to use that as the selector template, and the target is the invoice record that we're on. So it's running whenever that field is changing on the specific invoice entity. Otherwise, if the invoice display on portal equals no, then we're basically ending the workflow. So pretty straightforward, right? So that is the first thing, is we need that workflow. Then what we need to do is we need to have a couple of other fields that we're adding. So if I go into the invoice entity, and we'll just go ahead and we'll look at the fields. So we've got a few fields here. We've got the display on portal, which is a 2 option, yes or no. Then what we have is a document path and a folder path. The document path is essentially going to be the whatever you've named that invoice .pdf. So whatever you want to call it, that's the document path. The folder path is going to be where we're going to put this that is related to that specific account entity that the invoice is for. And then finally, the invoice file is going to be a lookup. And if we go into this, we're basically looking up to a web file record. Now, if you don't know anything about portals, this is probably a little bit too far jumping right in. So, but basically that web file is one of the portal entities. So that's what the lookup is going to be too. Okay, so if we go back, and also within our solution, if we go into the account entity, what we have is a lookup to a portal web page, and that's basically using a lookup to the web page entity on this one, and you're going to have that on the account record. So if I go back into my invoice, and from the invoice, if I jump into my customer, and then we'll just look on the details area, and then there I have my portal web page field, and that is the lookup to a web page record. Alright, so let's go ahead and we will look in the portal app, and I'm going to go down to web pages, and I've got an ABC company web page. Now, I'm not going to cover it in this video or in the related blog, but what we need here is we need some kind of naming convention and some kind of process to where you are creating a web page that is all it's really being used for is to be able to create some kind of folder structure or path to where we're going to store the PDF of the invoice. So I'm not talking about how to create that process in this video, but you would want to have some kind of process that says, let's go ahead and create a new web page for each of our customers. Likely you would want to use something like your account IDs or something that is unique to where we can use that as the partial URL to create the string for this specific folder path. So we've got the name of the company and we're linking it to the website. The parent page is going to be a page I've created just called Invoices, and then the partial URL, again, it needs to be unique, so I've used the company name in this scenario, suggesting you use something like the account ID. Alright, the page template doesn't really matter because this is not going to be a page that we're actually even going to publish. I've created a new publishing state called folder page, which is actually in a draft state. So again, it is literally just to be able to create some kind of folder path. Okay, all right, so we've created that web page that is linked to the company. Now, what we also need to do is we need to create a web template which will be used as the to link to a page template that we're going to use for this specific page. So if I'm on this page on the portal and I go to edit it, we can see here that we're using a page template called Invoice Details. Now that page template, if you know anything about it, has to have it's basically a web template that you then link to a page template, and then you can pick the page template on a web page. So if I go into the Invoice Details web template, we can see here that I've basically created a custom web template. What we are doing is we are first of all saying, do we want to actually display the page copy if you want to have anything at the top of the page? Do we want to show any specific entity form? With this one we are actually showing an entity form called Invoice Details. Then what we're doing is we're using Fetch XML to basically get the new fields that were added onto that invoice. So that's the document path, the folder path, and then we're also getting the invoice number as well. And then we're basically checking to make sure that the invoice that we've navigated to, that we're pulling that one back specifically. Here's where we're then starting some code using something called PDF Object, which is open source code that I found, and this allows us to then embed that PDF, and the source of the PDF is going to be whatever the initial page that you used to link your account folder to. So I had Invoices page as my parent page for each of my customer pages then underneath that. So we've got Invoices, then we have the folder path that is basically the folder path that is using the path that we added to our account web page. Then what we've got is the document path, which will be essentially the name of the PDF that we're going to generate. So this code right here is what's going to allow us to then embed it in this nice little frame that looks like this. Okay, so we've got our web template here. Now what we need to do is have a process that will go ahead and then actually generate that PDF and then allow us to display it in the portal. So if I go back to the solution, what we've also got in here is we've got a flow, display invoices on portal. So let's go ahead and open up the flow, and let's go ahead and edit so we can have a look at this. Alright, so the very first thing we're doing is we're saying when there is a new note that is created, let's go ahead and trigger this flow. So remember that we talked about the workflow that was within CRM itself. That triggers when we set the field. Let's go back to our invoice. So when we say, do we want to display this on the portal or not, yes or no, that is triggering the workflow that is actually running that Word document template for us. And what happens is it puts that Word document template onto a note on the invoice. So that's the very first thing, is a new note is created. Then what we need to do is we need to check to make sure that the note that was created is actually on an invoice record and that there's also an attachment on it. If there isn't, then we're not going to do anything. We're going to end the flow. If there is, we're then going to go through some steps, and we're going to first of all get to the invoice that it's linked to. So that's using the regarding from the trigger. Then what we're going to do is, because somebody could have published the invoice out to the portal, realize that they've made an error on the invoice and need to adjust the invoice, they can take it off the portal, make the changes, and then they can publish it or they can push it back out to the portal again. So if that's the case, we want to make sure that we get the previous document that was published and we get rid of it. So we're basically saying, does the invoice file value, is there something in there basically? If there is, let's go ahead and get that web file, and let's go ahead and delete that web file. Okay, so we're doing that first of all. So in other words, if this flow has run previously and it's generated this invoice file, let's go ahead and get rid of it first. All right, so then what we're doing after that is we're going to get the customer account, and we're going to get that from the invoice from the customer field. Then what we're going to do is that portal web page lookup field that we added, that is basically looking up a web page. We want to get that specific page because that's the portal page for that specific account, which has the partial URL within it. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take that that file, so the content of the attachment for the Word document template that is linked to that note entity that was the trigger of the flow, we want to take that and we want to create a file in OneDrive for Business. So we can see there on the file content that there is an expression that's used, base64 to binary, trigger body, and then document body, and that's based on the initial trigger. So we're grabbing that document and we're basically putting it into OneDrive. We're then using a step that allows us to convert that document and basically turn it into a PDF. So we're using the ID from the step above, and we're basically saying make that a PDF. Then what we need to do is we need to create a new web file, and that new web file will have a parent, and the parent of that web file will be our accounts web file. Okay, so we're basically essentially creating a folder structure to where we could go to the account and see all of the children underneath it, which would be all of the web files for all of the invoices. So we're creating a web file, and our web file is going to be called whatever the invoice ID is from the initial trigger. The partial URL is going to be the invoice ID, or whatever you want to name it, .pdf. The publishing state for this is something that at the minute I couldn't figure out a way to do it. Let me know in the comments if you can think of one. But to get the publishing state of published, so I had to get the user GUID to get that. The website is going to be the same website that is on my accounts portal page. Then what we're doing is we are setting a few other things. We're setting it to be inline. And then if I go down to the bottom, the parent page is going to be the web page that is the accounts portal web page. Okay, so in other words, again, we're creating that folder structure. So if I go back into the web pages in the portal app and I go to ABC's company's web page, if I go to child files, we'll see any of those invoices that have been created. We'll be able to see those all within different child files. Okay, so we've got a bit of a structure. Then what we're doing is we are creating a note to attach to that new web file, and that note is going to contain the PDF that we have then basically converted from the Word document template. So the title, we're just going to call it invoice and whatever the invoice ID is. We've given it a description onto that note. So invoice PDF created a display in portal. Is it a document? Yes. Excuse me, the document, we're using the content from the convert file step. We are then giving it a file name, invoiceid.pdf. Now this one is really important, and this was actually a bit of a headache for a while before I figured out that MIME or MIME type, if that is not in there, then the PDF reader does not know that it's a PDF. So we have to set this application/PDF, and that will actually allow it to display. So if you miss that out, likely you're just going to have a blank page. Record created on, so I'm just using now. And then regarding is the web file from the step above that we've just created. So we're creating a web file for the invoice, and then we're creating a note with the attachment linked to that web file. So if we go back in here, and for example, we go to this one, and I go into notes, we'll see that that PDF is attached, and we've got the title and the description. So again, somebody that comes in and actually looks at it, although chances are you wouldn't, but if somebody was looking at this specific web file, they'd be able to see everything attached. Alright, so next what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the invoice record, and we're going to update it with the path and also a link to the file that was the web file that was just created. So we can see there we've got the document path, we've got the folder path, and down at the bottom we've got the invoice file, which is a link, a lookup to the web file that we just created. Finally, we've got two steps that's just going to clean things up a bit. It's going to delete the original note from the invoice, and that original note is what has the Word document template attached to it. And then lastly, we're going to delete the PDF that we added into OneDrive because we no longer need that. Okay? So what you're left with is the portal document being displayed on the portal. We see the folder path, the document path, and we have a link to the invoice file. And if we are on the invoice file, oh, well, let's pick one that does actually exist. Let's go back in here. Let's try again. There we go. And if we go into our web file, we can see there's the partial URL for the web file. It has a parent page of whatever the account's parent page is. If I go into the notes, we can see the PDF is attached. If we now go into the parent page, we can see there that we have our child files underneath that. Okay, so that then, if we go back into our web template and we look at our path, that will then find wherever that's been placed by getting the folder path and then the document path from the invoice that's being viewed, and will result in actually being able to see that PDF on the portal. So there's a lot of steps. You'll be able to review everything in the blog that I've got at meganvwalker.com, but hopefully this video helped. Apologies, it was quite long. There was a lot of information to cover, but I hope this helps. Any questions, any comments, go ahead and leave them below. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Megan Walker. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and that you learned something from it. If you don't want to miss out on any other content, you can go ahead and click on my face below to subscribe. And if you want to watch the next video, you can do that by clicking over here and go ahead and get started. Thanks again.